The diplomatic reception hall sparkled with 1,000 colors as delegates from across the galaxy mingled and talked. Princess Lyra sat alone at table 17, watching everyone avoid her like she carried a plague. They did not need to come close to feel the wrongness that radiated from her body. Even from 5 meters away, most species felt their stomachs turn and their heads throb with phantom pain. She had learned to recognize the signs years ago. First came the uncomfortable shuffling of feet, then the nervous glances, finally the polite excuses as beings found reasons to be anywhere except near her. The Sylvanthian royal bloodline carried a gift that felt more like a curse. Her ancestors had developed powerful psychic defenses that kept predators and enemies at bay. For Lyra, those defenses had grown so strong that they pushed away everyone. Her father called it a blessing. The emperor enjoyed sending her to diplomatic functions, knowing that her mere presence made others nervous and compliant. Rival ambassadors agreed to unfavorable trade terms just to end meetings quickly. Military commanders signed treaties without argument, all because sitting near Princess Lyra felt like standing too close to a nuclear reactor. She smoothed the silver fabric of her formal gown and pretended to read the digital menu floating above her plate. Nobody would sit with her to share the meal. Nobody would make small talk about the weather or politics. She existed in a bubble of enforced solitude, visible to all but untouchable. Across the hall, the Metherian ambassador threw his head back and laughed at something his companion said. The Durathi trade minister clinked glasses with the Roshan military attaché. Life and warmth and connection flowed everywhere except around table 17. Lyra had stopped crying about it years ago. Tears accomplished nothing except smearing her makeup and disappointing her father. A princess did not show weakness. A princess sat straight, smiled politely, and pretended that loneliness did not feel like drowning in an empty ocean. The environmental control system chose that moment to malfunction. The temperature in the hall spiked noticeably, causing uncomfortable murmurs among the guests. Within minutes, a human in a maintenance uniform entered through the service door, carrying a toolbox and a handheld scanner. He moved through the crowd with purpose, not bothering to make eye contact with the important delegates. His focus stayed locked on the environmental control panel built into the far wall. He walked past table 17 without hesitation or pause. Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat. He had come within 2 meters of her, closer than anyone had dared in months. She waited for him to stumble or grab his head in pain. She waited for the inevitable reaction that always came. The human knelt by the control panel and opened his toolbox. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he removed the cover plate and began scanning the internal circuits. He showed no signs of discomfort, no wincing, no pale skin or shaking hands. Nothing. She stared at him, unable to look away. He was completely ordinary in every way. Average height for a human, maybe 40 years old, with brown hair starting to gray at the temples. His uniform identified him as Owen Reeves, Station Maintenance Division. He hummed quietly to himself while he worked, some tune she did not recognize. The other delegates had noticed too. Conversations grew quieter as people turned to watch the impossible scene. A Falreen ambassador whispered urgently into her communicator. 2 Cordian guards shifted their stance, hands moving closer to their weapons. Owen remained oblivious to the attention. He replaced a burnt circuit board, closed the panel, and ran a diagnostic check on his scanner. The environmental system resumed its normal function with a soft hum. The temperature in the hall immediately began to drop back to comfortable levels. He packed his tools, stood up, and brushed dust off his knees. As he turned to leave, his eyes met Lyra's for just a moment. He gave her a small, polite nod like he might give anyone, then walked back toward the service exit. Lyra sat frozen in her chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt like she had just witnessed something impossible. In 23 years of life, nobody had ever come that close without suffering. Nobody had ever looked at her with such casual indifference, as if she were just another person in just another room. The Sylvanthian ambassador rushed to her table the moment Owen left. He stayed at the edge of her radius, his face tight with concern. "Your Highness, are you unharmed? Should we report that human for attempted assault?" "He did nothing wrong," Lyra said quietly. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "He was simply doing his job. But he approached you without authorization or protective equipment. The breach of protocol alone is not worth discussing," Lyra interrupted, using her royal authority to end the conversation. The ambassador bowed stiffly and retreated. She returned her attention to her empty table, but her mind raced with questions. How had the human tolerated her presence? Did his species possess some natural immunity? Had he even noticed anything unusual? The databases contained millions of files about human biology and culture, but she had never bothered to study them before. Humans were considered unremarkable by most galactic standards. Nothing special, nothing unique. Yet Owen Reeves had walked past her like she was nothing more than another guest at a diplomatic reception. He had stood close enough that she could have reached out and touched his shoulder. And he had shown no pain, no fear, no desperate urge to escape. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Princess Lyra felt something other than resignation about her future. She felt curiosity. She felt hope. And late that night, alone in her quarters with the lights dimmed low, she accessed the station database and began searching for every piece of information available about human biology and psychology. There had to be an explanation. And if there was an explanation, perhaps there was also a possibility she had never dared to imagine before. Lyra's private quarters glowed with the soft blue light of multiple data screens floating in the air around her bed. She had been awake for hours, reading everything she could find about humans and their strange resilience. The information fascinated and frustrated her in equal measure. Humans came from a world called Earth, located in an unremarkable star system far from the major trade routes. Their planet had subjected them to conditions that most species would consider hostile. The magnetic field fluctuated wildly compared to stable worlds. Solar radiation poured through gaps in the atmosphere. Volcanic activity and seismic events occurred with alarming frequency. Yet humans had not only survived but thrived. According to the xenobiology reports, human brains had developed unusual resistance to electromagnetic interference as a direct result of their harsh environment. What would cause seizures or unconsciousness in a falrine barely registered to human nervous systems? Psychic attacks that could paralyze a Cordian warrior might give a human nothing worse than a mild headache. She read one report 3 times, hardly daring to believe it. The researcher had concluded that humans possessed the highest natural psychic resistance of any known species. They had not evolved psychic abilities themselves, but their biology had built formidable walls against psychic intrusion, like developing immunity to a disease by surviving exposure. Lyra closed the screens and lay back against her pillows, staring at the ceiling. If the reports were accurate, then Owen Reeves had not endured her presence through effort or technology. He simply existed in a body that treated her psychic field like background noise. To him, she was just another person. The thought made her chest feel tight with an emotion she could not quite name. Over the following days, she found herself timing her walks through the station to coincide with maintenance shift changes. She memorized Owen's schedule from the public duty rosters. She learned that he worked in Section 7 most mornings and Section 12 in the afternoons. She discovered which corridors he used to move between assignments. She told herself she was simply conducting an experiment. Scientific observation. Nothing more. The 3rd time their paths crossed, Owen glanced up from his datapad and recognized her. "Your Highness," he said, nodding respectfully. He stepped aside to let her pass in the narrow corridor. "Thank you," Lyra managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She walked past him, intensely aware of his presence only an arm's length away. When she reached the end of the corridor and looked back, he had already returned his attention to his datapad, reading while he walked. The 5th time, he held the door open for her without being asked. The 7th time, he gave her directions to the observation deck when he saw her studying a station map. Each interaction lasted seconds, nothing more than basic courtesy. But to Lyra, they felt like precious gifts. Her bodyguards noticed the pattern and reported it to the Sylvanthian ambassador. Within days, she received a formal communication from her father. The Emperor's message was brief and pointed. Fraternizing with station personnel showed weakness. It suggested that she sought companionship, which undermined the image of powerful isolation he had carefully cultivated. She was to cease these encounters immediately. Lyra deleted the message and continued her walk. 2 weeks after the diplomatic reception, she found Owen working in a maintenance corridor deep in the station's lower levels. No other people were around. He knelt beside an open access panel, muttering to himself about corroded connections. She stopped a few meters away, gathering her courage. The environmental systems seemed to malfunction frequently. Owen looked up, surprised to see her in such an out-of-the-way location. He climbed to his feet and wiped his hands on a cloth. Herald's Gate is an old station, Your Highness. Built 70 years ago with technology that's outdated now. We spend half our time keeping things running that should have been replaced decades ago. That sounds frustrating. It's job security, he said with a slight smile. Though I wouldn't mind if the budget committee approved the upgrades we keep requesting. Would make life easier for everyone. Lyra realized this was the longest conversation she had held with anyone outside her own species in years. She desperately wanted it to continue, but had no idea what to say. All her education had focused on politics and protocol, not casual conversation. "Do you enjoy your work?" she asked finally. Owen shrugged. "It's honest work. Keeps the station running, keeps people safe and comfortable. That matters. Plus it pays well enough to send money back home to my family on Earth." "You have family, wife and daughter." Rachel works in stellar cartography for a research institute. Amy just turned 12. Smart as a whip, wants to be an engineer like her old man. Pride colored his voice when he spoke about them. Lyra felt something twist in her chest. A family. People who loved him and waited for him. People who missed him when he was away. She could barely imagine such a thing. "They must miss you while you're stationed here." "They do. I miss them too. But my contract is up in 4 months. Then I go home for 6 months before deciding if I want another tour. Good money in station work, but it's hard being away." He said it so casually, as if leaving and returning were normal things. As if love and connection were not impossible dreams, but simple facts of life. "I should let you get back to your repairs," Lyra said, suddenly feeling the weight of her loneliness pressing down on her. "No problem, Your Highness. Have a good day." She walked away slowly, her mind churning with thoughts she had never allowed herself before. Owen had a wife who chose to be with him, a daughter who loved him, a home to return to. He lived a life full of ordinary connections that Lyra had been taught were not meant for people like her. But he had stood close to her without pain. He had spoken to her like she was a person, not a weapon or a political tool. If a human could do that, what else might be possible? That night, she made a decision that terrified and excited her in equal measure. She would find a way to speak with Owen again. Not as a princess conducting an experiment, but as someone seeking what she had been denied her entire life, not a friend. Owen pulled open the door to the maintenance break room, balancing a sandwich and a bottle of water in his other hand. He stopped short when he saw Princess Lyra standing near the window, looking out at the stars. She turned when she heard him enter, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "I apologize," she said quickly. "I did not mean to intrude. I was told this area was open to anyone during the midday break." "It is," Owen said, recovering from his surprise. "You're welcome to be here. Just not used to seeing royalty in the break room." He sat down at one of the small tables and unwrapped his sandwich. After a moment's hesitation, Lyra moved to sit across from him. Owen noticed her hands fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve, a nervous gesture that seemed oddly human. "Do you eat lunch here often?" she asked. "Every day. Quiet place to think. Most folks go to the cafeteria levels, but I like the view here." Lyra looked out the window again. The station hung in orbit around a gas giant, and from this angle, they could see the planet's swirling storms and the rings of ice and rock that circled it. "It is beautiful. Better than the inside of an access tunnel, that's for sure." She smiled slightly at that. Owen took a bite of his sandwich and studied her. She looked different than she had at the diplomatic reception, still elegant, but less formal. She wore simpler clothes, and her hair was pulled back in a practical style rather than an elaborate arrangement. "Can I ask you something?" Owen said, "and you can tell me if it's rude or out of line." "Please. Why do people act so strange around you? I've noticed folks practically run the other direction when you walk down a corridor." Lyra's expression grew guarded. "You truly do not know? I'm just a maintenance guy, Your Highness. Nobody briefs me on diplomatic protocols or royal customs." She took a slow breath. "My species evolved a defense mechanism, a psychic field that causes discomfort in most sentient beings. For those with weaker mental shields, it can cause nausea, headaches, even temporary paralysis. My bloodline carries an especially strong version of this trait." Owen processed this information while he chewed. "So everyone feels sick when they get near you?" "Yes, but I don't feel anything." "No, humans appear to have natural resistance to psychic interference. Your species evolved on a harsh world that required strong mental defenses against electromagnetic disturbance. To you, my presence likely feels completely normal." "Huh," Owen said. "That explains why people were staring at me like I'd grown a second head at that reception. You did something they thought impossible. You approached me without suffering." Owen shook his head. "That's rough. Being avoided all the time because of something you can't control." The simple sympathy in his words made Lyra's throat tight. She had received pity before, false and calculated from people who wanted to manipulate her father. But Owen's concern sounded genuine. He looked at her the way he might look at anyone dealing with a difficult situation. "I have learned to accept it," she said quietly. "Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, though." She met his eyes and found herself unable to look away. "No, it does not mean that." They sat in comfortable silence for a minute. Owen finished half his sandwich before speaking again. "You're welcome to join me for lunch whenever you want. If you'd like some company, I mean. No pressure." Something in Lyra's chest felt like it was cracking open. "I would like that very much." Over the following weeks, their lunch meetings became routine. Owen talked about his work, his family, his life on Earth. He told her about Amy's struggles with math homework and Rachel's excitement about mapping a newly discovered nebula. He complained about the station's aging systems and shared funny stories about bizarre maintenance requests. Lyra listened to every word like someone dying of thirst given water. She learned about birthday parties and family dinners and lazy weekend mornings. She learned about arguments over whose turn it was to do dishes and inside jokes that only made sense to people who truly knew each other. She learned about a life that seemed impossibly warm and normal. She began to share things too, carefully at first. She told him about growing up in the palace, about tutors and lessons and endless hours spent alone in vast rooms. She told him about books she had read and places she had seen only through windows or screens. She described what it felt like to attend a celebration knowing nobody would speak to her beyond formal necessity. Owen listened without judgment or pity. He asked questions. He made observations. He treated her experience as valid without treating her as fragile. "Your father doesn't sound like he gets it," Owen said one day after she described another cold message from the Emperor. "He sees my condition as an asset, a tool for political manipulation. That's messed up. You're his daughter, not a weapon." Lyra stared at him. Nobody had ever said such a thing out loud before. Nobody had ever challenged the Emperor's choices regarding her. "He believes he is doing what is best for our people." Maybe, but what about what's best for you? The question hung in the air between them. Lyra had no answer for it. She had spent her entire life being told that her personal happiness mattered less than her duty to the Empire. Her loneliness was a sacrifice for the greater good. But sitting across from Owen in the quiet break room, watching him treat her like a normal person deserving of normal kindness, she began to wonder if that was really true. She began to wonder if there might be another way to live. Station security monitored their meetings and filed reports. Ambassadors whispered about the strange friendship between the isolated princess and the common human. Rival delegations tried to determine what strategic advantage Earth might gain from the relationship. None of it mattered to Lyra. For 1 hour each day, She got to be someone other than the loneliest princess in the galaxy. She got to be just Lyra, talking with a friend over lunch. And that was worth every risk. The summons from her father arrived during breakfast. Lyra read the message 3 times, feeling her brief happiness crumble into dust. The Emperor had ordered her to return home within 48 hours. The diplomatic mission was complete. Her presence was no longer required on Herald's Gate Station. She had 1 day left. One final lunch with Owen before she returned to her gilded cage. Lyra found him in the break room at the usual time. He took one look at her face and set down his food. "What's wrong?" "I am being recalled to my home world. I leave tomorrow morning." Owen's expression shifted through surprise and concern before settling into quiet resignation. "I figured this wasn't permanent. Important people don't usually stick around maintenance break rooms forever. I wanted to thank you," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the emotion churning inside her, "for treating me like a person, for giving me something I did not know I needed." "Hey, you don't need to thank me for basic decency. I just treated you the way anyone should be treated. That is exactly why it mattered so much." They shared their last lunch together, talking less than usual. The silence felt heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. When Owen finished eating, he stood and offered her his hand. Lyra stared at it for a moment before reaching out and clasping it. His grip was warm and firm. She had forgotten what simple touch felt like. "Take care of yourself, Your Highness. I hope you find some happiness wherever you end up. I hope your daughter becomes the engineer she dreams of being." Owen smiled and released her hand. He left the break room without looking back, and Lyra sat alone watching the stars for a long time afterward. The attack came during her official departure ceremony the next day. Lyra stood in the main concourse, surrounded by diplomatic delegates who maintained their careful distance. Speeches were being made about cooperation and understanding. Nobody listened very closely. Everyone just wanted the ceremony to end, so they could return to normal business. Owen was 50 meters away, working on a malfunctioning gravity regulator. He had volunteered for the assignment specifically to catch one last glimpse of Lyra before she left. He was not paying attention to the speeches either. His focus stayed on the technical readout, showing inconsistent gravity fluctuations. The neural disruptor weapon looked like a simple communications device. The assassin, a Falreen extremist, had smuggled it through security by disguising it as diplomatic equipment. She raised it with steady hands and aimed directly at Lyra's head. Owen happened to glance up at that exact moment. He saw the device. He saw the assassin's stance. He saw the way other delegates were positioned too far away to intervene. His brain processed the situation faster than conscious thought. He dropped his tools and ran. The disruptor fired with a sound like tearing metal. Owen's body collided with Lyra's a fraction of a second before the neural pulse reached her. They hit the floor hard as the deadly energy passed through the space where she had been standing. But Owen had moved into the path of the blast. His natural psychic resistance meant nothing against a weapon specifically designed to bypass mental defenses and attack neural tissue directly. The energy slammed into his nervous system like a sledgehammer hitting glass. He convulsed once and went completely still. Lyra scrambled out from under his limp body, her mind struggling to understand what had just happened. Security personnel swarmed the assassin, weapons drawn. Other guards formed a protective circle around the princess. Medical teams rushed forward with emergency equipment. Someone tried to pull Lyra away from Owen's body. She pushed them back with enough force to send them stumbling. For the first time in her life, she deliberately weaponized her psychic field. The agony radiating from her pushed everyone back 5 meters in all directions. "Do not touch him," she said, her voice carrying absolute royal authority. "Do not come near him. Medical team only." The human medical staff arrived with a stretcher and scanning equipment. They moved quickly and professionally, checking Owen's vital signs and stabilizing his spine. One of them looked up at Lyra with grim eyes. "We need to get him to intensive care immediately. The neural damage is severe. I will accompany him." "Your Highness, protocol requires." "I do not care about protocol. That man saved my life. I will not leave him." The Sylvanthian ambassador tried to intervene. "Princess Lyra, Your father has ordered your immediate return. The shuttle is prepared for departure. We cannot delay because of one injured human." Lyra turned to face him. Her psychic field flared with emotion she had suppressed her entire life. The ambassador staggered backward, his face going pale. Everyone in the concourse felt the wave of raw power radiating from her. "Send a message to my father. Tell him I am remaining on this station until Owen Reeves recovers or dies. Tell him I will not abandon the only person in this galaxy who has shown me genuine kindness. Tell him if he wants me to return home, he will have to come here and drag me back himself." The ambassador opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. He bowed stiffly and retreated. Medical staff loaded Owen onto the stretcher and rushed him toward the medical bay. Lyra followed, maintaining enough distance that her field would not interfere with their equipment. Other personnel scrambled to get out of her way, in the intensive care unit. She stood outside Owen's room and watched through the transparent wall as doctors worked to save his life. His body lay motionless on the bed, surrounded by machines that monitored every function. His brain activity showed chaotic patterns that made the medical staff exchange worried looks. Lyra pressed her hand against the wall and made a silent promise. Owen had given her hope that life could be more than endless isolation. He had risked everything to save her without hesitation or calculation. She would not let him face the consequences alone, even if it meant defying her father, even if it meant abandoning her duties, even if it cost her everything. She would stay. For days passed with no change. Owen remained unconscious while doctors from 3 different species tried to repair the damage to his nervous system. Lyra maintained her vigil in the observation room, sleeping in a chair when exhaustion forced her to rest. Station personnel brought her food she barely touched. The Sylvanthian ambassador sent increasingly urgent messages that she deleted without reading. That on the 5th day, a transport shuttle arrived, carrying Owen's wife and daughter. Lyra stood when they entered the observation room, uncertain what to expect. Rachel Reeves was a tall woman with dark hair, pulled back in a practical bun. She looked exhausted and worried, but held herself together with visible effort. Her daughter Amy pressed close to her side, a thin girl with her father's brown hair and her mother's sharp eyes. Rachel studied Lyra for a moment, then walked forward until she stood at the edge of the psychic field's effective range. Amy followed without hesitation, showing no signs of discomfort. "Your Princess Lyra," Rachel said. It was not a question. "Yes, I'm so sorry. Your husband saved my life, and this is how he was repaid. Owen told us about you. Said he made a friend who needed someone to talk to." Rachel glanced through the observation window at her husband's still form. He's always been like that. Sees someone who needs help and steps up without thinking about the cost. He should not have had to pay such a price for basic kindness. Maybe not, but that's who he is. That's who I married. Rachel's voice cracked slightly on the last word. Amy pulled away from her mother and walked directly toward Lyra. She passed through the psychic field like it was nothing more than air. Up close, she barely reached Lyra's shoulder. She looked up with eyes full of questions. "Did my dad really tackle you out of the way?" "Yes. I did not see the weapon. He saved me." "That sounds like Dad. Mom says he once carried a stranger's groceries for 6 blocks because they looked tired." The simple statement made Lyra's throat tight. Owen had not saved her because she was royalty or because he expected reward. He saved her because someone was in danger and he could help. It was just who he was. Rachel joined them, and the 3 of them stood together watching Owen through the window. After a moment, Rachel spoke quietly. "The doctors say his brain is trying to heal itself, but the damage was severe. They don't know if he'll wake up. If he does wake up, they don't know how much function he'll recover. Human medical science is advanced. Surely there is hope. There's always hope. Doesn't make the waiting easier." Over the following days, Lyra learned what family meant. She learned about Rachel's work studying distant stellar phenomena. She learned that Amy was struggling with physics homework and loved building model spacecraft. She learned that Owen always made pancakes on Sunday mornings and that his terrible jokes made Rachel groan but smile anyway. They shared meals in the observation room. Rachel talked about how she and Owen met at a research station where he was fixing a broken telescope mount. Amy showed Lyra pictures on her datapad of family trips to the beach and Owen teaching her to ride a bicycle. They included Lyra in their conversations naturally, without making her feel like an outsider. He talked about you, you know, Rachel said one evening after Amy fell asleep at her chair. Said you were dealing with something really hard and that people weren't treating you right. He was the first person to treat me like I mattered beyond my political usefulness. That's Owen. He sees people, not positions or titles. Drive his supervisors crazy sometimes because he'll stop working to help someone who looks lost or upset. Rachel smiled sadly. I used to worry that his kindness would get him hurt someday. Guess I was right to worry. I would give anything to undo what happened. I know you would. But Owen made his choice. He saw someone in danger and he acted. That's the man I love. I can't be angry at him for being himself, even if it terrifies me. On the 8th day, the Emperor arrived at Herald's Gate. Lyra met him in a private conference room, maintaining her composure despite her anxiety. Her father looked older than she remembered, his silver hair showing more white at the temples. You have embarrassed our family and our empire, he said without preamble. Your refusal to return home has become a diplomatic incident. Our enemies see weakness. Our allies question my authority. A good man lies in a medical bed because he saved my life. I will not abandon him. He is one human maintenance worker. His fate is irrelevant compared to the stability of the empire. His fate is everything to me. Lyra met her father's eyes without flinching. You taught me that power requires sacrifice. You were right. I am sacrificing my title, my position, my future. I will not return home to be your weapon anymore. The Emperor's expression hardened. You think you can survive without the Empire? Without your title? I will find a way. Even if it means I end up alone again, at least it will be my choice this time. They stared at each other in silence. Finally, the Emperor spoke. You have changed. Yes, I met someone who showed me that isolation is not strength. Connection is not weakness. Everything you taught me was wrong. And if this human dies despite your vigil, what then? Then I will mourn him, and I will still not return. The Emperor left without another word. Lyra returned to the observation room and found Rachel and Amy still keeping watch. They made room for her without comment, and the three of them sat together in the quiet darkness. That night, Owen's fingers twitched. A doctor noticed a movement and called for additional monitoring. His brain activity showed new patterns, stronger and more organized than before. He was fighting his way back. Lyra pressed her hand against the observation window and allowed herself to hope. Sunlight filtered through the trees in Riverside Park, casting dancing shadows on the grass where children played and families spread picnic blankets. Lyra sat on a bench watching the casual chaos with quiet amazement. 3 months had passed since Owen woke up, and the world looked completely different now. You're doing that thing again, Owen said, settling onto the bench beside her with 2 cups of coffee. He walked with a slight limp now, a permanent reminder of the neural damage, but the doctor said he was lucky to be walking at all. What thing? Staring at normal life like you're watching something miraculous. Lyra accepted her coffee and smiled. Perhaps I am. A year ago, I could not have imagined sitting in a public park surrounded by people. Now look at me. Around them, humans went about their daily routines. Parents pushed children on swings. Teenagers threw a disc back and forth. An elderly couple walked past holding hands. Nobody paid special attention to the alien woman on the bench. To them, she was just another person enjoying a pleasant afternoon. The assignment to Earth had been her idea. After Owen's recovery, she had formally requested placement as cultural liaison to humanity. Her father had agreed, perhaps relieved to have her safely distant from Sylvanthian politics. Or perhaps he understood that she would never return to her old life regardless of what he commanded. How's the work going? Owen asked. He had left station maintenance to join the diplomatic technical team, finding that near-death experiences made him reevaluate his career choices. Fascinating. 3 more Sylvanthians with conditions similar to mine have requested transfer to Earth. They arrive next month. I am helping prepare orientation materials. building a whole community of people who can finally interact without pain. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. It would not have happened without you. I just fixed environmental controls and ate lunch. You're the one who had the courage to stay when everyone told you to leave. Rachel appeared on the path with Amy, both carrying bags from the bookstore. Amy ran ahead, excited about something. She had taken to calling Lyra Aunt Lyra within a week of meeting her, and neither Rachel nor Lyra had the heart to correct her. Look what I got. Amy held up a technical manual about spacecraft engine design. The guy at the store said, "This is what real engineers study. At college level, but I can handle it." "I have no doubt you will master it," Lyra said. "Your intelligence exceeds your years." That a fancy way of saying she's a nerd, Owen said, pulling his daughter into a one-armed hug. Amy squirmed but grinned. Rachel sat down on Owen's other side. "We got you something too." She handed Lyra a small package wrapped in colorful paper. "You did not need to do this. Just open it." Lyra carefully removed the wrapping to reveal a picture frame. Inside was a photograph taken 2 weeks ago at Owen and Rachel's apartment. The four of them stood together, arms around each other, all smiling at the camera. It was the first photograph Lyra had ever appeared in where she did not stand apart from everyone else. "I thought you might want a copy for your quarters," Rachel said. "Since you're family now." Lyra stared at the image, her vision blurring slightly. Family. She had a family, not by blood or political arrangement, but by choice, by shared experience and mutual care, by Owen's instinctive heroism and Rachel's generous acceptance and Amy's innocent affection. "Thank you," she managed. "I will treasure this." They stayed in the park until the sun began to set, talking about nothing important. Amy showed off her knowledge of engine specifications. Owen complained about a particularly difficult repair job. Rachel described a beautiful nebula her team had finished mapping. Lyra listened and contributed and felt warm in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. As they walked back toward the transit station, Amy slipped her hand into Lyra's. The casual touch still surprised her sometimes. The easy affection humans showed each other had taken time to grow accustomed to. But she was learning. "Aunt Lyra," Amy said, "do you think other aliens might come to Earth like you did? I want to meet more species." "I believe so. Humans have something special. You have the ability to see people rather than obstacles. That gift will draw others who need acceptance. Dad says you're special too. He says you were brave to choose your own path." Lyra glanced at Owen, who pretended not to hear. "Your father is the brave one. He risked everything for a stranger. That's just Dad being Dad. But you did something harder. You left everything you knew because it was wrong. That takes a different kind of courage." From the mouths of children came uncomfortable truths. Lyra had never thought of herself as brave. Desperate, perhaps. Lonely. Willing to sacrifice anything for a chance at connection. But Amy saw it differently. She saw someone who had chosen a harder path because it was the right one. They reached the transit station as the last light faded from the sky. Owen and Rachel needed to get Amy home for dinner and homework. Lyra would return to her quarters in the Sylvanthian embassy, where she would continue her work helping others like her find their way to Earth. Same time next week. Owen asked. I would not miss it. She watched them board the transit pod, waving through the window until they disappeared from sight. Then she stood alone on the platform, but not lonely. Never lonely again. She pulled out her communicator and checked her schedule. Tomorrow she would meet with the architects designing housing for Sylvanthian visitors. Next week, she would give a presentation to human diplomats about psychic field variations. In 2 months, she would return to Harold's Gate to help establish a formal exchange program. Her life had purpose now. Not the purpose her father had assigned her, turning her isolation into a weapon. Real purpose, helping others find the connection she had been denied for so long. Lyra looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the Emperor ruled his empire and played his political games. Somewhere out there, beings still avoided each other out of fear and discomfort. But here on Earth, surrounded by humans who saw past differences to the person underneath, Lyra had found what she needed most. She had found home.